Welcome everyone to this webinar on commercial excellence in life sciences, why enterprises are choosing specialist providers. In this webinar, we'll talk about specialists within commercial, we'll talk about who they are, how they're evolving, and what sets them apart. Before we go into the details, I wanted to share some context for this audience. Right? So as an analyst firm, we work with procurement groups in helping them identify the right providers they should work with. We often see that mature procurement organizations don't just tier their providers based on size. Instead, they categorize them based on the specific role they play and the capabilities they provide. One of those categories is specialists who offer services in select area, often possess a lot of depth in those areas, but may not have the same coverage across the entire value chain or across industries. And because the specialist can be specific to a function or specific to an industry, we often get questions from procurement groups on wanting to better understand this landscape and where specialists are able to bring in differentiated capabilities. Now, if you look at life sciences in particular, one of the areas where we see a lot of specialists is commercial, particularly commercial analytics, both in terms of number of specialists and also their scale. And we've covered this landscape in a lot of detail, covering both the large IT BPO providers as well as specialists. As I mentioned in this webinar, we'll focus more on the specialists. We'll talk about who they are, how they're evolving, and what sets them apart, right? To do this, there are a few things that we're going to talk about. Tia, if you can, sorry. Yeah, so there are a few things that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about first, what are some of the pain points that a lot of commercial organizations are facing. We are then going to talk about what is the provider ecosystem that is helping the commercial organization solve for those challenges. So we'll talk about specialists. We'll also talk about the other, we'll also talk about who are the others, right? Because it's not just suppliers who are helping commercial organizations address those pain points. And then we're going to spend most of the time on specialists and how they are different, what sets them apart in today's evolving market. So to begin with, just wanted to share what challenges that we see commercial organizations grappling with. And broadly, there are four types of challenges that we see them facing. So on the one hand, there's more scrutiny on budgets, there's more push on timelines. So we see launch excellence windows. They have tightened from 12 to 18 months to now under 9 months. We are seeing more aggression on price on cost cuts. So particularly around SG&A cuts, where we are seeing CFOs demand anywhere between 7 to 10% cuts. At the same time, we see, if you look at the years from 2025 to 2030, there's a big patent cliff looming where a lot of blockbuster drugs are about to lose their patent exclusivity. The other type of challenge that these organizations face is around data and fragmented omni-channel efforts. So while there have been a lot of transformation initiatives that these organizations have embarked on or plan to embark on, one of the biggest challenges for that is how fragmented the data is. So if you look at top 20 pharma companies, they process large amounts of data on HCP and real world data streams, but only 20% of the HCPs feel personally engaged. And over 80% of the commercial leaders admit that omni-channel programs have delivered limited impact because of siloed data stacks. So while there is intent, but just the debt and the legacy that the industry has, it means that it becomes difficult to transform the function. The third is AI talent and scale gaps. Now, while again, the industry has, I would say, embraced AI, and there are multiple different initiatives that different organizations have prioritized. But the common challenge that we see is that most of these enterprises are running Gen AI pilots, only about 5% of them consider that these are a competitive differentiator. So we see most of the, at least the earlier use case, to be still focused more on productivity. And other related challenges around talent, right? So around 75% of the enterprises mention that the talent strategy needed to scale these initiatives is lacking. And now the fourth type of challenge that we see is rising complexity. So again, if you look at the clinical trials, they're increasingly getting more complex. More and more we see increasing focus on areas like oncology and rare diseases, which now account for 40% of the global R&D trials. And both of these areas, they require bespoke launch and commercial strategies, right? So again, tight budgets, push for more timelines. Organizations are looking to embrace AI. They often face challenges with talent. They often face challenges with siloed data, and all this while the complexity is increasing. Right. So that's a quick view of what are the challenges that we see commercial organizations face. We also want to hear from the audience. So according to you, which of these four areas is the biggest challenge in scaling commercial transformation in life sciences? So you would see a poll in front of you with four different options. I will keep the poll open for about 30 seconds. While we get those responses, why don't I ask some of my fellow panelists to share their opinion on what they feel is the biggest challenge?
So maybe I can start, right? So it's time for the first poll of the day, and like Chunky you mentioned, I think it's very pertinent how you brought up, the top four challenges. While we do a lot of analysis, I know there's a long list or a laundry list of challenges that we throw to the market. So I'll maybe quickly summarize, why we have these top four as the challenges and these four as the options for the poll today. First, I think, like Chunky mentioned, tighter budgets and accelerated launch timelines. They have become the new normal. Launch windows, they are compressing every day, making agility more critical than ever. And we'll see some of these themes play out as we, uncover some of the themes with specialists. And I think second thing that Chunky you mentioned, and that's the second option listed in the poll, it is, that despite significant investments in omnichannel strategies, majority organizations, enterprises, they continue to struggle because of siloed data and fragmented efforts which are disintegrated across diverse functions. So it is impacting customer engagement, overall campaign effectiveness drastically. And third, I think the option which we have here, and the last point that you picked up, it is around increasing complexity across therapeutic areas and targeted R&D efforts. This means that commercial teams, they now need to navigate highly specialized and customized launch strategies. You named rare diseases, oncology. So those are apt examples where, complexity is high. The launch strategies, they are much more nuanced than before. And finally, I think despite excitement around Gen AI, Agentic AI, organizations, they are facing significant challenge with talent. It's around skilling, upskilling, onboarding new talent, what talent to onboard. And that challenge is putting organizations behind in terms of, scaling those initiatives beyond pilot phases. I see we do have 60% votes from attendees. So maybe I'll pass it on to Sanket and see. And do you want to share the results from the poll? I do see some
Sure,
interesting numbers coming.
yeah, I think this is really interesting to hear that the challenge around the budget constraints as well as the shrinking launch windows is the biggest challenge for commercial. I think that clearly highlights the cost. The cost is still the driver within this space, and I think one of the key factors is that these poll results still showcase, right, that these are structural barriers that are slowing down commercial transformation, right? It's not just around having the right budgets for this, but also in terms of the actual frictions on the ground with regards to the launch as well. And I think if we move on to the next slide, increasingly enterprises are looking at outsourcing as a key parameter to navigate these challenges that they are facing. And as they increasingly outsource, we look at different suppliers or vendors in the ecosystem specific to commercial services. I think earlier what we could see is that the landscape has evolved from being a very binary choice between IT providers and boutique service providers that specialize in this field into a very, I would say, complex but evolving field where we see a lot of different providers that now encompass this field. What we've tried to do is categorize these into three major provider types. The first that you see is the commercial services specialist. So they are service providers with deep domain expertise within the commercial function within life sciences, having the right set of therapeutic expertise, having very modular solutions that cater to the specific requirements of life sciences enterprise for their commercialization strategy. And what I mean by that is they would have heritage or strength within, for example, Salesforce enablement being one, or marketing support being one, or patient support, while they're increasingly spreading their capabilities portfolio across the entire commercial value chain. And just a couple of examples. CS, for example, has really strong foundation within the Salesforce enablement field through their platform. But now that they are also increasingly offering services across the value chain, Indegene has a very strong heritage, strong focus around the marketing and content support, which is now being leveraged as overall campaign management as well as Salesforce effectiveness. And Real Chemistry had a very a creative agency background, and now they're also incorporating marketing support functions that help with end-to-end campaign management. So this is in terms of the commercial specialist. We also see the global system integrators or the large IT BPO firms that are scaled cross-industry, industry agnostic companies, which offer these end-to-end transformation and integration capabilities. While their approach has been around having these very broad solutions and technology portfolio that help with the overall management of the operations, but now they're increasingly verticalizing their functions, their portfolio, and offering life sciences specific capabilities within the solutions that they have. So the example of Accenture Cognizant, where they have very broad platforms such as Accenture's Intient or Cognizant's Neuro, but they have increasingly tailored their solutions around the requirements of life sciences enterprises. And finally, a very, I would say, not a new category, but within this field, what we're seeing is the AI and analytics-led providers that lead with data analytics and have those technology capabilities. They are increasingly gaining the market share within this space where they're using their technology strength, their data analytics and AI strength, and solving very specific use cases that are required in terms of specific requirements of the life sciences enterprise, while they bring in that cross-industry expertise that they have from across different engagements that they work with, and the likes of Fractal, Mathco, where they leverage their very strong data analytics capabilities, having those dashboards, etc., as well as the AI, Gen AI, agentic AI capabilities that they have across the board.
I think, Sanjay, it's very interesting that you talk about the commercial services specialist providers, right? The first cohort, right on this page here. It sort of, in a way, took me back to the first assessment that we did back in 2021, as you were speaking to their value proposition around deep domain expertise and building more modular solutions and services that are extremely tailored to the needs of life sciences commercial function, right? But I should say that since that assessment and to the latest one that you recently did, which really brought all these three different providers on the same page, which is life sciences, commercial analytics, and AI services, peak matrix assessment, I should say that the specialists have evolved in a quite a fast-paced manner, right? So if you can go to the next slide, I think this kind of really summarizes what's been the journey, or how have we seen the journey of some of these specialist providers. Now, I think if you really go back to where did they start, a lot of them really started with core advisory and consulting support, focused on maybe designing the launch planning phase, or let's say designing a specific campaign for a brand, right? Essentially brainstorming with commercial functions and strategizing around very specific problem statements, right? Be it around sales, be it around marketing. But I think as they sort of worked alongside these commercial teams, they really brought in that very strong domain and process workflows understanding within the commercial function. But so this soon started not just strategizing, but also sort of executing those strategies. But again, still in very specific pockets or very targeted use cases, right? Not at a scale where it is truly end-to-end commercialization as well. But I think that's when the industry had witnessed the pandemic, and where once upon a time digital was more like a good to have thing, it became a must have, right? All of us have seen how very quickly enterprises had to ramp up and build hybrid commercial models. I know, Rohit, you did a complete thought paper just on defining what's this new age commercial model, and I'm sure if I just tee you up there, you might speak to that as well. But again, as I'm thinking, reflecting on this, I realized that the talk track historically at that time frame has been around how do we integrate digital with traditional touch points, build that true view of what my HCP patient preferences are, and building that omni-channel strategy, right? So I think that's where, with that demand in the market, what specialists have done is built very contextualized accelerator IP solutions that were speaking to the demands that we're seeing in the market at that point in time. But I think since then, we've seen a bunch of changes in the product landscape as well. We were Salesforce parting ways. I know a bunch of you that might have joined in right now would have also heard in through to a couple of our LinkedIn lives in the past around Viva Salesforce as well. And I think all of that together has created certain white spaces or pockets in the entire product market as well, which not just product providers are trying to plug, but even specialists are eyeing that opportunity, right? So notice any service, any specialist that Sanket spoke to in the previous slide, most of them have their own specialized set of offerings, be it ZS's Zaden, Indigene's Next Suite, Trinity's Edge suite of solutions, Axtria's own Datamax, Sales IQ. All of them are now starting to build more productized offerings. And I also see a bunch of them starting to hire chief product officers as well. And as we speak to them, they also talk to us about how they are quite keen on doubling down on that product strategy of theirs so that they can speak to the current white spaces that they are seeing in the market, especially in the commercial technology landscape, given their very strong process and domain understanding, right? So while I see them as moving from third to fourth in terms of where they are right now, I won't be surprised that they will start looking at themselves as a end-to-end commercialization partner for some of these top life science enterprises. I definitely see there's some room or some more journey out there for them to establish themselves as that end-to-end commercialization partner, but I should definitely say they are way moving strong in that particular journey.
Thanks for sharing that overview, Durga. And good to, as you mentioned, right, good to see how they've evolved compared to the first time we did the assessment to the latest assessment. And I think that's a good segue to the next section, where what we want to do is we want to talk about what are some of the themes which set some of these commercial services specialists apart. And so we'll talk about a few themes. I have three experts with me, so we've selected three themes. So why don't we go to the first theme?
Sure. Thanks, Chunky. So what we see in respect to the commercial services specialists, right? They are defining their value proposition in such a way that it's resonating with the leading life sciences enterprise. What we also look at is three key levers that they leverage to actually differentiate themselves into the market. And we see that the journey that, as Durga had mentioned, right, they were started from a very niche, very specific project-specific requirements into more scalable towards that end-to-end comprehensive coverage. And the three key levers that they have are, number one is the purpose-built solution. So, like we mentioned, that the challenges that the commercial teams face today, compressed launches, be the cross-channel fatigue or HCP disengagement or regulatory compliance burdens. Enterprises are increasingly seeking very specific technology solutions, ecosystems that cater to them and speak their language. They are not going for generalist solutions, generalist platforms that can be more overarching. They need those specific solutions with pre-configured components around those specific key elements, such as Salesforce, or it can be marketing support or patient support. And that's where the platforms that these specialists bring to the table, they offer these pre-integrated modular components that align to the different workflows that the enterprises have across the, I would say, across the breadth as well as the depth of the commercial value chain. And then this not just increases the contextualization of the solutions and the engagement, but also increases the onboarding, improves the overall TCO for the enterprise. On the second aspect, having that therapeutic area expertise and therapy native delivery expertise. So if you look at the increasing launch or the strategy of a lot of pharma companies is around novel therapy, oncology, these rare diseases, where every misstep, be it in a content, be it from a timing perspective, it can be targeting, carries a very heavy risk in terms of either can be regulatory, reputational, or even revenue. And again, this is again where the commercial specialists fit in, where they bring in that therapeutic area expertise, therapeutic nuance through their past engagements, through the thought leadership that they have done. And not to that, they just combine the delivery teams as well as the knowledge that they bring across the board. And that can be specific to different brands, different therapeutic areas. It can be different channels. And that kind of execution, when that is the knowledge is brought to execution, that is really hard to replicate for some of the other firms in the market. And that's where the differentiation comes in for commercial specialists. And finally, on the value-based engagement and innovation, if we look at the economy in the current landscape, right, the SG&A constraints that we have, the buyers are increasingly seeking performance, right? They are not looking at overall FT headcount, those kind of parameters. They're increasingly asking the questions of providers: can you tie your fees to what we can actually achieve, right? And that's where again specialists are rising to this challenge or to this ask from the enterprises, where they are tying their engagements around specific KPIs, outcomes that are linked to commercial teams. So be it increasing HCP engagement, be it having a script lift in terms of those particular brands or drugs, also improving the engagement with different patients. So these kind of metrics that speak directly to the commercial engagements, and that's where specialists are bringing that value to these engagements. And not just that, above and beyond, they're co-innovating with their clients through shared IP, defining roadmaps around how they can deploy technology, what is the best way forward, having that consultative edge as well that helps not just enterprise navigate the path, but also realize value through this.
Hey, thanks, Sanket, for covering the first theme. As I look at unfolding the next theme, so I think you and I, we are sort of reading from the same hymn book, because some of the things that you mentioned in terms of value prop, or the value proposition that they bring to market. So I'll try and break it down, that how they are taking that value prop in the form of GTM to their target customers, and that's our theme too, right? So how does their go to market differ from maybe their larger peers, or the others in the landscape that you talked about? So while Sanket, you mentioned about the broader three themes, so I think in our interactions with enterprises, we consistently observe a clear preference towards providers who deeply customize their GTM strategies. Hence, this makes for the second theme that we have. And when I say enterprises look for customized GTMs, so they're not looking at it from a superficial level. So they want it to be covered comprehensively across the tenets of, say, technology, data, talent, AI, messaging, and you talked about outcomes or the commercial models that they follow. So in a way, those are sort of strategic pillars of specialist GTMs that they have, especially for life sciences commercial. So I'll touch base on each of these. So the first one, you also touched upon this a bit, but looking at the entire technology and data approach, I think there's great differentiation to how specialists tackle it, how they go to market with this. They are prioritizing modular, fit for purpose solutions, tech platforms, tools. A while back, Durga talked about how, ahead of its time, someone like Aziz brought forward Zaden, or how Extria, they are still experimenting with their suite of data maxes or sales IQs that they have. So they're bringing those modular tech first platforms tools to the market rather than say broad based enterprise wide those age old monolithic implementations, which by the way is still a norm, and it is still followed by non specialist providers in the world. So specialists, they're delivering these modular solutions, and they're delivering this with contextualized data models, which are designed specifically around either a function or a workflow, or even specialized to the extent of, say, particular use cases. For example, we have seen examples around personalized XCP engagements or modular content analysis, delivery, so on and so forth. So this focus strategy, it accelerates deployment, and some of them, they are able to directly see the impacts on the outcomes. Second thing, which is a great differentiator for specialists, and this is something, again, how they have evolved. So this has always been there. That is the domain focus and the domain trained talent. Specialists, they embed therapy specific experts directly into delivery teams. Unlike broader, AI focused firms where maybe there will be a bunch of data scientists, specialists blend deep commercial expertise or disease specific knowledge into the service delivery teams. So this ensures a far more nuanced understanding of, therapeutic areas or stakeholder behavior. So this again has the impact on the outcomes. So this is where again, it hits my head that, Sanket, you walked us through the supplier ecosystem wherein you had three different kinds of suppliers that we have, specialists, GSIs, or AI-led providers. So based on your observations, and you recently led an assessment where you spoke to all the kind of providers, you've spoken to their buyers. So do you see this significant difference in how some of the specialists or majority of specialists, they approach their talent strategies or their adoption of tech as compared to others that you had on that slide? So do you see this significant difference as to how we have it spread out on this slide?
Yes, Rohit, I think there's a certain difference, definitely certain difference, especially in the talent and technology that the specialists bring to the table. So what we see with especially with complex therapeutic areas, the success of those programs depend on navigating fragmented provider networks, gaps in education, not just internally but externally, as well as the compliant heavy content frameworks and workflows that are there that associate with these therapeutic areas. And that's where again having the blend of therapeutic expertise within the delivery teams, that's where the specialists, commercial services specialists excel. And what they do is they include a lot of these former brand leads, MSLs, regulatory writers, experts with experience, past experience within the field, and they embed these across the delivery teams, across their solution design as well. So that allows them to have that extra contextualization that can support across different levels, across different phases, as well as different personas that are there within the entire ecosystem. On the technology side, I think you touched upon it, the use case first approach that the specialists take, right? That's where they differentiate a lot with some of the other players in the ecosystem, where the approach is we start first with one particular use case within each function. So it can go to the L2, L3 level of functions within each sales and, for example, sales and marketing, having the right kind of HCP engagement, targeting, segmentation. And then they scale and build that with the clients, how that can be improved and that can be scaled across different brands, different countries, different teams. Back to you, Rohit.
Thanks, Sanket, for sharing those perspectives. And again, like Durga mentioned in the beginning, the first of our assessments in the specialist area we did back, 4 years back. And it's great to see how, while value prop on paper, it can change, but, hearing you say how they are having that kind of impact and how that is visible when you've spoken with buyers as well, I think that's really encouraging to see. And to that, right, so tech talent domain. This was always their strength. This is where they started from. So what's interesting for me to see and to see, getting uncovered or specialists do is the next three pillars. I'll again take it one by one. AI playbook or Gen AI or agentic AI first approaches that we see. Specialists, they are increasingly embedding agentic AI, deeply across commercial workflows. They are moving beyond generic use cases. They are bringing out use cases or workflows which are very contextual. How they're able to do it, because they have a lot of domain trained micro agents or co-pilots, so to speak. These agents, they are trained on domain specific data sets, and they very well aligned with the already existing commercial workflows, so which ultimately enables more precise, more impactful recommendations and support. And this was really now why I picked these three, in the end, and first two differently, is because these were some of the things where previously, or 4 5 years back, uh, specialists were kind of laggards. They were not very bold to invest in this next gen workflows, technologies. But I think the script has flipped a little. Reading from what we see recently, the AI playbooks that they bring forward, they are much more mature, much more hand in glove with the clients. And similarly, they are not shying to embed that in their market messaging, which is the next pillar in the GTM that specialists follow. They craft highly targeted, domain-led commercial narratives that speak directly to specific commercial stakeholder needs. And like Sanket, you just mentioned, how they appeal to every kind of persona, be it brand teams, marketing heads, or commercial operation leaders. So these narratives, supported by tangible proof points around technology effectiveness, domain expertise. So all of this, it's resonating strongly with clients. And lastly, I think we've touched upon this, across other slides, how, their outcomes first or outcomes focused approach and innovative commercial models, it has really stuck well with enterprises, and it has stood as a great differentiator for them. Their pricing models, they are around measurable KPIs. They actively commit to performance based matrices, such as I've seen instances, where they don't have the typical age-old matrices. They are bringing in matrices such as, say, incremental sales, the lift in HCP engagement, or accelerated launch timelines. So this is making their overall value proposition that we just saw in the previous slide highly transparent and outcome focused. In doing so, they differentiate significantly from broader set of providers where, pricing tends to be, what would you say, less tightly aligned with commercial outcomes. So net, these are the five pillars, where specialists, they have their differentiators, and these are the ones they're weaving their GTM strategies around.
So I think, Rohit, there's a question around how are specialists tweaking their approach across technology, talent, AI, and messaging to better meet enterprise needs, and where are they seeing the biggest commercial wins? So I think I can take a stab at that question, but Rohit, feel free to add if you would like to share any other perspectives. But let me start with technology. I think we spoke to it a couple of times around how specialists are building technology solutions that directly address the white spaces that are currently in the life sciences commercial technology market. I think um, the the idea is to build solutions that currently the CRMs out there are not solving for, and target areas where enterprises are more often than not ending up building more customized solutions, right? So more around data-driven decision making, be it for sales reps, be it for marketing professionals. How do you help uh, sales reps do a best job in terms of targeting the right customer at the right time with the right kind of content, right? I know these are all talk tracks that we've been historically talking about, but I think the point is more around what are the white spaces that are currently unaddressed, where enterprises are continuously ending up building of the customized solutions. And these are the very solutions specialists have been helping them build, right? So now the idea is to build an off-the-shelf IP that can be cross-leveraged in multiple client scenarios. I'll speak to the talent bit also. Again, I think given their roots, domain expertise is something that's already on board, right? Given that they definitely want to venture more into technology and leveraging AI and Gen AI, that's where I think the focus is more to onboard experts who can help them build technology and addressing those exact pain points that they're already aware of from a domain standpoint. So again, from a talent standpoint, the idea is to not onboard more domain experts because that is something they already have. It's more about onboarding and pivoting more towards tech-focused talent so that they're able to complement their existing domain expertise with more next-gen, especially AI and Gen AI related talent pool. And I think from a market messaging standpoint, we'll be speaking to that shortly, but a very quick take is they tend to lean a lot more on their understanding of the process workflows at an L2, L3 level. That's where the specialists tend to shine, especially in areas around rare diseases, where typically a lot of other service providers might not be able to bring in that kind of a depth. That's where specialists tends to shine, right? I know this was one of the points that Chunky also alluded to when he was speaking about enterprise pain points. So I hope that answers your question. Rohit, in case you would want to add anything else, especially from an AI standpoint, please go ahead.
No, I think majorly you have covered, all the pointers. So maybe just additional pointer on AI or Gen AI. I think one thing is that specialists, like we talked about, how they have evolved. So they don't have a lot of tech or process debts. And also, majority of them, they will not have long running engagements with their existing clients, so their hands are not tied. So that way they are a bit more flexible. They work more hand in glove with their clients. And one edge that they also highlight in their messaging is how they are quickly able to pivot if things are not working well. And this we hear consistently when we engage with enterprises that with the fast changing world, with new shiny tech coming out every other week, this is the agility or flexibility that we have with specialists, that they will be able to pivot from the existing workflows to the new ones overnight. So I think that's one change. While everyone can bring tech to the fore, everyone can bring agents to the fore, but how quickly you contextualize it to clients' tech environments, to their needs, I think that's where specialists are sort of taking an edge when we speak about, specifically about, say, agentic AI or Gen AI.
Thanks both Durga and Rohit. Since I think we were taking questions, there's one more question. So Sanket, I'll direct that to you. You talked about pre-configured components. Can you share any examples of how the specialists package value-based solutions and services?
Sure, Chunky. And again, that's an interesting approach that a lot of specialists take. What they essentially do is, even within specific areas such as Salesforce engagement, right? They look at that L3, L2, L3 level of services that they can offer. So a couple of examples that I can recall at the top of my mind is, for example, within field force and sales enablement, having territory mapping templates that are based on specialty coverage or targeting or patient proximity. They provide next best action engines that calibrate to the brand maturity, the HCP behavior that they're targeting, as well as the channel preferences. Certain points around the omnichannel marketing, where they map the entire journey, the omnichannel journey by indication, by region or life cycle stage. Similarly, on the patient support side, where they map the patient journey, which again helps contextualize the solution that they provide to specific brands, therapeutic areas, or patient cohorts as well. Similarly, across content operations as well. So having modularized engines that can auto tag, create regulatory ready submissions content, right? Having pre-trained AI models for summarization, repurposing, creating sales content. So those kind of very targeted pre-configured components that they bring to the table that are very modular in nature. So it can, again, depending on the requirement of the enterprise, they can deploy those particular solutions, again, reducing the kind of deployment times and the speed to market and having that knock-on effect for the enterprises.
Fantastic. So thanks for that, Sanket. So let's move to our second poll. You will see that in front of you shortly. So how are your generative and agentic AI initiatives currently structured? Are they more centralized and enterprise-led, or are they more modular, brand or function-specific deployments? I think we're already starting to see response come in. So far, around an roughly equal split. I'll just ask my fellow panelists, if any of you, what have you heard from your interaction so far?
I think like the upcoming poll results, I think there's no one right route to Gen AI or agentic AI deployments or AI initiatives. And I think it's also very function and use case specific. There are a few use cases, especially around agentic AI, where we see a lot of modularized approach, getting popular because it is very agile. You can onboard agents in a very closed environment and start getting outputs from the next day. While some of the Gen AI initiatives, they are much more centralized, at least the conversations that I've been part of. Gen AI needs a lot more centralized programmatic approach to adopt, to spread across functions, enterprises, while agents, while in the long run, they will need a more programmatic approach, but deploying them, getting outputs from them, that can be done in a more modularized fashion. Happy to see if others are seeing things
Yeah,
differently.
interesting perspective, and interesting to see again how the answers may differ for Gen AI versus agentic AI. So I think let's move to the third theme. Durga, I'll hand it over to you to walk us through the third and the final theme.
Yeah, I think the poll results is a nice cue for me to go into theme 3, because again, I think we've talked about how specialists are currently supporting enterprise clients. But when you think about Gen AI-like initiatives that are more centralized, enterprise-wide manner, needs that more end-to-end transformation lens, I think that's where, given specialists are already doing a good job in pockets where enterprises are leveraging them, the expectations are continuing to increase in terms of how they can add value in initiatives that cut across the enterprise, right? So, basis our conversations with life sciences clients, these are the 4 things that we've identified as, again, I'm assuming some of this won't be a surprise, but these are expectations of clients from specialist service providers. The first thing is more brand recall, right? And I am assuming this is not a surprise, especially because given the industry that we are in, enterprise clients always want past examples of, have you done this for my peers? Whom have you done this for? How can you execute this in my own landscape, right? So while specialists do a very good job in terms of putting point of view out there in terms of what's the latest trends in the market, what are buyer needs, speaking to those directly, what enterprise clients are expecting them to do more often than not is talk to them about the kind of work that they've done for their peers, and start establishing themselves as a brand out there. So again, the intent is to sort of increase the mind share amongst the budget stakeholders, right? The second piece is, given I think where they've started off, which is more strategy and more consulting lens, the footprint of these specialist service providers tends to be more onshore focused in a way, and sometimes nearshore focused, depending on the provider at hand. But as you think about more enterprise-wide initiatives to unlock cost efficiencies, there's always a consideration to explore offshore delivery capabilities as well. So, and we are seeing some of the bigger specialists already have this presence, but I think we are now increasingly starting to see a lot of the other specialist providers quickly ramping up their offshore expertise so that they are able to draw more cost efficiencies. And the third piece, again, to the poll results, which show that a little over 50%, I think 56 nearly percentage of the audience mentioned that most initiatives they are seeing are centralized enterprise-led AI hub, right? Which speaks to the point that as specialists think of themselves to support enterprise-wide initiatives, they need to sort of speak the language of the CXOs, not just the commercial function leaders, right? So that's the expectation, again, as you think about supporting on more enterprise-wide transformation. And lastly, I think all of us are aware that building capabilities by themselves right from scratch, while it's a good way to sort of ramp up one's capability portfolio, but it's not the only way to it, especially because in the ecosystem that we are in the commercial technology and services ecosystem, it's truly an orchestration-led approach in terms of unlocking those commercial outcomes, right? So how do you sort of not just focus on what kind of capabilities can you bring to the table, but how well integrated are you with the other players in the supply ecosystem, be it tech providers, be it RWD, RWE providers? How do you sort of create a more partner ecosystem-wide strategy so that you're able to not just cater to areas that you flourish in, but are also able to tap into other pockets through these strategic partnerships? So again, I think this is where we see enterprises sort of we expect enterprises we see enterprises expect from specialist service providers as they look to position themselves as an end-to-end commercialization partner. So I think that is what I wanted to share on this particular slide. But I know I sort of talked about the latest assessment that we've done, which is on the life sciences commercial analytics and AI services peak matrix assessment. And this is something that just went live a couple of weeks ago. So if you are keen to understand the three different types of providers that Sanket alluded to when we kicked off this webinar today, and you're keen to learn more about these providers, what's their value proposition and how do they stack up against each other, feel free to reach out to us, and we are happy to share a complimentary abstract of that report, or feel free to reach out to any of the panelists with any questions that you might have.
We're nearing the end of our presentation. I think we've taken some questions that were already shared, but I think just in the interest of time, if there are any other questions, we are happy to answer them. But one of the things, just I think before we close, what we also wanted to share with the audience is around some of the events that are going to take place in Dallas. Again, so for both enterprises as well as providers, if you're interested in events which are more focused around some key topics of interest to you, which could be around, again, GBS, which could be vendor management, or if you're a provider, you're interested in understanding how you can succeed, just check out these two. Check out more details on Engage and Elevate. They'll be in the chat, and if these are of interest to you, then please reach out. Okay, I think with that, I don't think there are any other questions. So I think with that, we'll wrap it up. Thanks everyone for joining in, and see you next time.